when you're dealing with customer attrition, especially because you've got competitors who are aggressive, one of the things you want to do is think about how I can offer them not just what I've committed to offering them, but providing them an extra level of unexpected support. We have done research that suggests what builds loyalty with consumers on behalf of some of our clients. And one of the things that really drives loyalty is getting the unexpected, not what you thought you were going to get. If you're a credit card company, your customers get points for every transaction. That's not going to really boost their loyalty in tough times. What will is getting things that you didn't expect, like an upgraded service at the same cost. You can do this in B2B, you can do this in services, you can do this for consumers, something they didn't expect at the same cost, or a discount, maybe on their anniversary, which shows two things. It shows that you're giving them a little bit more for their relationship. And it also shows them that you're paying attention to milestones in the relationship that you have with them. So looking at those surprise opportunities can really be great.
Yeah, here's another idea. We're all committed to customer insights and doing that kind of research. Why not have those kind of conversations with your current customers? Reach out to them when you're doing this human touch and you're trying to provide those unexpected benefits. Ask them how you can serve them better. There's nothing customers like better than being asked for their input into how you can help them. And that, just the act of doing that, can create a bond between you and them that can strengthen that customer relationship. So
No question.
Here's this opportunity to ask them how you can help.
If you want to know how a customer feels about something, if you want to know if they're at risk, if you want to know if they're satisfied with your service, ask them. They don't mind being asked. In fact, it's a way to signal to them that their opinion matters and their relationship matters.
So step number one, take those extra steps. Be as creative as you can, be as engaged as you can, lean into your relationships with current customers to make sure you retain them. So that's the first thing.
That's it.
Second thing we talk about is, it's a corollary to the conversation we just had about customer insights and consumer research, right? So let's use our discipline around customer and consumer insights to find opportunities for additional innovation during this time of recession, and to keep a closer watch on how our customers' needs are changing during this time.
Yeah, it's not unusual to hear people talk about how there's no better time to change things than at times of crisis. Times of crisis give us unexpected opportunities because the whole world is under stress. You don't have to stay in your rut. You can actually change things. Innovating around what you offer is a great way to do that. It kind of goes to a notion that you can accelerate out of the turn by boosting things. Forbes says that the average recession lasts for 17 months. And typically, we don't know about a recession happening. It's not reported to be happening until it's halfway over. But interestingly, if you look at that same Forbes data, it shows that since World War II, recessions have lasted on average 10 months. That means if we are in a recession, we're also nearly out of a recession at any given time. And so if you are the one who's accelerating out of that turn faster than your competitors, it gives you a competitive advantage, an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that your competitors might be slowed down in terms of their sales and marketing activity. And you can get out there faster, knowing that the corner is about to turn at any given time with the recession.
Right. So don't stop your innovation efforts, because by the time we know we're in a recession, we're probably half the way out. Right. The second thing is that these kind of economic shocks don't just affect companies, they affect the customers that you work with, right? Whether it's a B2B or B2C. And it changes their priorities, it changes their needs. And it makes it even more important for you not to cut back on consumer insight and consumer intimacy activities so that you can stay really close to your customers so you can understand how this recession is changing their needs, and you can use those changing needs as fuel for your innovation efforts. They may need something from you that they didn't before, and this is an opportunity for you to know about that and give it to them in a way your competitors don't.
That's right.
Yep.
And, kind of tangential to that, pay attention to what category, as you're thinking about your innovation. We often tend to stay in our lanes. If you're a mid-sized business serving mid-sized customers, then you tend to stay in those lanes. But at times of disruption, companies are looking for more affordable, more nimble solutions. They may be more willing to give up their the businesses that they work with that are larger to move downstream to a lower strata. And that means that if you are in a mid-sized organization, you might be able to reach out to larger clients. This is in any category, investment banking, business services, et cetera. Those larger clients that might not be easy to get under good times because they're fat and happy and really good with their current relationships may consider you more.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's the kind of the flip side to the desperate competitor.
Yes.
Is that you should go after your competitors' customers because their needs may be changing. Don't be the desperate person, but be the opportunistic person. So don't shy away from that, because these kind of economic shocks throw everything into kind of up in the air.
That's right.
And make things available and relationships available that might not have been available before.
Really.
So that's the second thing. First, retain customers. Second, leverage insight for innovation and keeping an eye on changing customer needs. Third, we have to have an investment mindset. And it's hard to do that at a time when the pressures are so high during a recession.
Yeah. What's interesting is financial advisors will tell you that the best time to buy any securities is when they're depressed, right? The prices are lower. I can buy them more affordably and they can have a higher impact. Real estate professionals will tell you they love to go shopping for real estate at times of recession because they know that it's going to last 10 to 17 months or whatever. And then that depressed price will rebound to its normal price. But the same is true in marketing. If you invest at times that when things are depressed, you'll often get more bang for the buck. You'll be more important to your buyers. And in the case of media, you have more leverage with media outlets. You can establish longer term buys, longer term contracts while the rates are depressed and lock in depression rates, even though you know that that depression will be over 10 months from now.
Yeah. I mean, think about continuing to think about it from a media standpoint. If you think about it in terms of share of voice, and you assume, which I think is a fair assumption, that most people in a recessionary environment will have a knee-jerk reaction to cut things. And oftentimes that cut happens across the board. We're doing a 10% across the board cut. I mean, how many times have you heard that, right? It's the wrong way to do this, but it happens all the time. If it happens in media and you're disciplined enough to not make that knee-jerk 10% across the board cut, your share of voice mathematically will go up.
That's right.
Because you're getting a greater share of a shrinking pie just by maintaining your spend, right? So that investment mindset becomes really, really important and can become, in the face of competitive knee-jerk reactions, a competitive advantage.
That's right. Now there's a cautionary note here.
Yeah.
We don't want to sound like, hey, we
That's right. Just keep spending.
Just spend money, invest, ignore the recession. That's not what we're saying to do. In fact, you do want to take this opportunity to eliminate the waste that is in everyone's marketing budget. And there is waste in everyone's marketing budget. If we're honest, we all know that client who sponsors a golf tournament because somebody in senior management likes to golf. Nothing wrong with that in good times.
I don't know who that would
be. Let's kill it. In tough times, we want to make sure that every dollar we are spending is contributing to our marketing goals. So you want to be harsh about the waste that's there and take a good hard look. In some cases, we have clients that might have multiple advertising agencies on contract. Some consolidation, especially at tough times, gives them the leverage to improve the relations and improve pricing. Do those things. Do the waste elimination, but don't do it at the cost of investing in those things that actually are moving the needle in the right direction for you.
Yep. Good call. Now here's some data that might help you make this argument about an investment mindset. There's two studies that we found particularly interesting. One goes all the way back to the 1980s, and it was a study that was done by McGraw-Hill. And they looked at businesses that maintained or increased their advertising spend during the 80 and 81 recession against businesses who cut. And what they found was that the ones who maintained or increased their advertising spend during that recessionary time actually had sales that were 256% higher on average than companies who cut.
That's enormous.
Right? So it's avoiding, some major pain that you're going to cause by doing a knee-jerk cut. The second study is one by Bain, much more recent, and this was 2019. What they found is that companies who kept marketing during the 2008 recession, when they looked at their annual growth rate between the end of the recession and that current time of the study, 2019, those companies who continued to spend enjoyed a 17% annual growth rate for those years versus a completely flat 0% for those companies who didn't continue to spend.
It's a great way to come out of that turn strong and actually make competitive advantage and market share advantage over your competitors, is to use the recession as an opportunity to take advantage of other people's hesitancy and invest wisely, conservatively, but invest in your marketing.
Okay, so for those of you who might have joined after the introduction, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited about the conversation. We've got the chat open. If you have any questions as we talk, we'd love for you to put them into the chat, and we'll read them out and we'll answer them as we go. So feel free to do that. So we've covered 3 things, Kelly, that we should do in a recessionary environment. We should pay extra focus on retaining our customers. We should leverage our discipline in insight and innovation to continue to innovate and meet changing customer needs. We just talked about the need to adopt an investment mindset in the way we think about our marketing spend. The 4th one is the opposite of the last one, which is that you have to avoid those kind of knee-jerk reactions. Those sort of, we're cutting 10% across the board, which might make your CFO happy in a meeting, but it's a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in marketing in general, our philosophy at Brand Federation is don't do anything until you've done your homework first, done research into the consumer and their likely response to any move that you make. And the same is true with marketing spending and marketing investment at the time of recession. You're going to be tempted to just make wholesale cuts and do it quickly so that you're showing responsiveness to what could be a declining top line. What we recommend is be thoughtful, considerate, and conservative in all of your moves, not just conservative on spending on the upside, but conservative on cutting on the downside. Again, these are short-lived events that happen in the life cycle of all economies. And we're not likely to see something that's going to last for years and years. So you want to think it through.
Here's what'll happen if you do that. If you fall victim to the kind of convenient 10% across the board cut, is that it'll actually prevent you from being able to do all the other things we were talking about. You're not going to be able to take those extra steps to focus on your customers and make sure they don't leave. You're not going to be able to take those extra steps to reach out through research to understand how those customer needs are changing. You're not going to be able to invest the way you should in innovation that can carry you out of the recession. Because remember, by the time we say we're in a recession, we're probably halfway through it. So it's gonna hamper your efforts to do all the things you know you need to do during the recession to position yourself to not just survive but thrive afterwards.
Absolutely.
Right. So those knee-jerk reactions can be really dangerous. It's a hard argument to make, but it's a really, really important one. The last thought is simply to keep whatever is happening today in perspective. And it's hard to do because we always feel the pain of today more than we remember the pain of yesterday, right? It always seems like it's worse than it's ever been. It always seems like this recession is different and it's going to last longer, so we have to act differently. None of that's true. Keep your perspective. Think about this over the long term and don't overreact.
Yeah, if you had a recording of every past recession and some of the sort of alarmist things that get said, I know in 2008, there was a suggestion that housing prices will never be as high again. They got overcooked in 2007, and this is a necessary correction. They're never going to be as high again. I think we all know that's not the truth. They're higher than they've ever been now and continue to be strong. By the way, we also thought they were going to collapse when COVID hit, and they haven't collapsed. We thought they would collapse again when interest rates shot up because of the Fed's move to reduce inflation, and still housing has held strong. So keep your perspective, play the long game, keep listening as much as humanly possible to the customers that you serve, and also listen to the employees that you serve, because as a marketer, you're responsible often for helping to be the voice of the company to internal audiences. They have the same anxieties as the rest of us, and we need to keep our best employees engaged during times when they could be nervous as well.
Yep. Okay. So let's recap the 5 things that we tend to talk to our clients about. First, focus on retaining your customers. What do they need? How have those needs changed? How can you behave with them in a way that solidifies the relationship?
Always a good thing.
Second, leverage insight for innovation and changing customer needs. Now's the time to lean into research, to hear from your customers what they need, and adapt your approach to give them what they need in this unique time.
If you haven't done any customer listening for a while, do it right now. Like,
Now's the
leave this. You can check out. I'm looking for the names to go, the number of names to go down. Go and do that customer research. It's so important right now at times when customers are anxious.
Yep, that's the second one. Third is adopting this investment mindset. Right. Remember that the across the board cut doesn't make any sense. Be surgical, be thoughtful. Know that we know there are practicalities at play here where you're going to have to cut some money out of your budget probably, but let's be very, very smart and thoughtful about how we do it and where we do it. Mm-hmm. Which plays into number 4, which is avoiding the knee-jerk reaction. Don't overreact. React, but don't overreact. And then the last one, keep your perspective. This is a bit of history repeating.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like it, but it is.
Avoid alarmist messages. And if you're hearing them internally, try and help bring perspective to them. Some of the facts that we've included in our conversation today could be useful to you to help keep your clients or your colleagues on track. The fact that recessions since World War II have not lasted more than 10 years on average, or 10 months on average, is remarkable. Remind them that it's okay. Breathe a little, take a deep breath. We're going to get through this. Let's keep fighting our competitors so that we get our share when things turn back to normal.
All right. Now, we don't pretend to have all the answers to this. Those are the 5 things we talk about. If you all have other things that you think are important as strategic kind of touchstones for how to market through a recession, we'd love to see them in the chat. So how else are you thinking about this? In the meantime, we do have a question here, which says, what about internal audiences? What can or should marketing do to keep employees rallied in tough times? It's a hard thing to do. So how do we think about that as leaders? Are you playing with your computer? What are you doing?
I am. Sorry.
Right. So how do we handle the internal audience? The internal audience knows
such a huge thing.
that things are happening and they aren't great. They're listening to the news, they're watching their stock portfolio just like we are. How do we talk to them?
Yeah, well, I think we have to do it with empathy and understand there's a lot of anxiety at difficult times. And I think it takes a combination of confidence and candor. There may be layoffs in any organization depending on the depth and length of a recession. And so you never want to say nobody's going to lose their job because we don't know how deep or how long any recession may be. But to be confident about we are going to get through this. We're doing everything we can to be careful about our investments. We're also doing everything we can to double down our relationship with the customers, and we encourage you to do the same. You're important to us. Making sure that you're communicating early and often with your employees, especially at a time when your best employees could be poached by others during a recession, is a really smart thing to do. And I want to add to that, any of you who are employees who may be feeling anxiety during a time of recession about your own security, you can use some of the same techniques we've talked about, especially where we talked about how you can add value during times of recession to retain customers. Well, guess what? You can do the same thing as an employee. This is your time to do a little bit of extra work for the boss, take on an assignment that you might not have otherwise taken on, or just make sure that your value isn't missed by the people around you because you want to be in that job tomorrow.
Yeah, so I was talking to a friend of mine who runs a company just last week about how he's speaking to his internal employees about this time. And he brought up a thing that I really didn't know much about, but I've looked into since, and it's really cool. It's called the Stockdale paradox.
Yeah.
Right? So Admiral Stockdale, you may remember, was Ross Perot's running mate. So he was famous for that kind of, who am I and why am I here?
I can't
that he had
forget
on CNN.
Stockdale, although
But
that kind of ages us.
He's also an amazing hero, right? So he was a long-term war in Vietnam. And somebody asked him, how do you get through that terrible experience? How do you survive? And he said the people who survived were those who were able to hold a couple of different thoughts in their heads at the same time. One being, don't shy away from the brutal truth of your situation.
Yep.
But the second being, don't ever lose faith that you will prevail. And then when he talked about the people who made it through that terrible situation were those who said, I'm not going to deny the reality of how bad this is. And I'm not going to say, don't worry, I'm going to be out of here by Christmas. Don't worry, I'm going to be out of here by New Year's. Those people had their hopes crushed and didn't make it.
Interesting.
On the flip side, the other people who didn't make it were people who lost their faith that they were going to get through it all. The people he said made it were the ones who held those two thoughts. Don't shy away from the reality of your situation, but never lose faith that you can get through it.
I love that.
And as a
Candor.
leader, that's amazing advice.
The combination of candor and confidence. I got to say though, Matt, I never thought I would hear Admiral Stockdale mentioned on a Beer and Brands podcast. I'm
Well, there's no beer
on a Coffee and Brands. My
right.
bad.
That's right. So look, crazy things happen when there's no beer.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true. Admiral Stockdale.
Anyway, so there you have it. One other question. What signs should marketers look for that signify a recession might be beginning to turn?
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, if we look at even recent history, we did see a mini recession, I would say, when COVID hit, and wisely so. Now, whether that was a matter of consumer confidence or simply a matter of the inability of consumers to go out and shop safely, we don't know, and we can't really unpack that, but we certainly saw a downturn. When you started to see things coming back, you saw people investing again in things that are sometimes considered luxuries, like dining out. Dining out is a great predictor of how people are feeling about things. We dine out a little bit more when we're feeling comfortable about our wealth and our future, and we kind of pull back on some of those discretionary items, cook more at home when we don't. So look at consumer discretionary items especially, and those can have a factor in helping you know that people are feeling confidence. Most recessions are confidence driven. They're not necessarily economically driven. They're driven by how we feel about the economy. We've had great spending and great growth at times when there was really no strong economic reason for it, but consumers felt good and they're going to keep on spending anyway. And we've had when there were no inherent economic underlying conditions that suggested a downturn. Consumer confidence is the best way to understand whether we're going into a recession or not. We're going to see it actually this holiday with holiday spending. I think it's going to be pretty strong. But when we get those holiday numbers, it will tell us whether people have cut back on their giving because they're not feeling confident about next year.
Yeah, I think this question, Kelly, is gonna throw us into the next question. And before we do that, I want to one thought that I have about how do we know it's starting to turn. I think there are macro level data. There's macro level data that we can look at, like the ones you were talking about, consumer confidence, CPIs, things like that. But there's also micro level data, which is data that you can connect to the success of your own particular business, right? It's going to be different for our business, different for each of your businesses. And it's going to go back to that need to keep a closer eye on your customers, both qualitative and quantitatively. How are they behaving? How are they behaving, and how is that behavior affecting those KPIs that you know are so important to the success of your particular business? You have to stay closer to them to understand how those things are moving. And when they start to turn up, you'll know because you're paying attention to those measures that matter most to your business, which is the next question.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, on that question, one of the things that shows you that we're heading into a little bit of a downturn is that we're hearing reports at that micro level from our clients that the time it takes to close a deal is slowing down. So they're still closing deals.
Yeah.
But people are considering it longer, negotiating it longer, discussing it longer, and waiting longer to pull that trigger.
Yep.
That's a sign of just some insecurity, right? As I said, recessions are driven by human beliefs and human opinion. And if you're a little insecure, you might be saying, well, should I take on this expenditure now?
Yeah, that's a micro level measurement that we pay attention to.
Absolutely.
The sales cycle changes.
Here at Brand Federation.
Yeah, the sales cycle changes.
Yep.
And the close is a little tougher.
That's
to
right.
nail down. Okay. Here's a question in the chat from Cody. Are there certain marketing KPIs that become more important during a recession? What are the most important things to measure during and afterwards?
That's interesting. Well, Yeah, that's a great question.
I think there are. So
Yeah.
think about, there's a quote
Thank you.
There's a quote I love here.
I'm still thinking.
It comes from,
Matt's got the answer,
Zach, no,
as always, right?
so there's a quote that comes from an interview I saw with a firefighter. And what he said is 99% of our problems go away if we just put out the fire. Right. So his job when he shows up at a fire is to put the damn fire out, right? Don't worry about strategy. Don't worry about put the damn fire out. So if you're in a recession, there are parts of your business that are an immediate threat, right? Is it long-term brand equity trajectory? Probably not.
Right.
Is it short-term sales turn? Yeah. Is it how long it takes to close a deal like it is for us? Yeah, probably so. In my mind, those short-term business KPIs become dramatically more important at that time when you're focused on just putting the fire out.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's really great common sense. You want to look at everything in your sales funnel and every stage of that sales funnel and ask yourself, is the top of the funnel growing at the same rate it has been over the past 12 months?
Mhm.
Are the size of deals the same size of deals that we've been looking at over the past 12 months? Now, again, some of that's in B2B, but even from a consumer point of view, are incoming sales where they have been, and really being looking at year-to-year comparisons at the transactional activity is probably your best bet.
Yeah. So you may look at a KPI that says, look, we're seeing some drops in velocity on store shelves. Well, that's a problem. How do we fix that? How do we pull the levers that we know will have shorter term effect on our sales? And maybe temporarily just bring some funds over from longer term investments to fund those during the time when the fires burn.
Yeah.
Now I got to bring them back at some point, and I don't want to pull so many out of those longer term investments that I violate our rule number 3, which is adopt an investment mindset. I don't want to knee jerk into a short term time period, but if there's a fire, I got to put it out.
There's no question. The other thing that I always feel like I have to remind people of, if you're looking at your KPIs and you're looking at those transactional performance indicators for any given business that you're in, and they're worse off, in other words, they're declining by more than your competitors are declining, then your problem may not be the recession.
It's a handy excuse, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
You'll probably sit in a meeting over the next couple of months where somebody will say, look, we're just in a recessionary environment. This will turn as soon as the macro level economic sentiment changes.
Right.
Don't be lulled into a false sense of security for that. Ask yourself the hard questions: are there things happening that are affecting our company or our brand in a way that they're not affecting my competitors, or in a way that are disproportionately bad for me versus how they're affecting my competitors? Don't shy away from that. Don't let anybody on your team use the recession as an excuse for underperformance that might be an indicator of a different problem.
Absolutely. If you're doing worse than everybody else, there's a reason for it, and you need to find that reason. And it probably isn't a macroeconomic trend.
Yep. Here's another question. What are the best ways to conduct consumer research and to keep close to our customers?
Well, gosh, we've got some research, I suspect, on the call, and the big buckets are always the same 3. We want to do some quant, qual, and some secondary research. The secondary research into the market is especially important in a recession because you want to look at what the macro trends are for the reasons we just talked about. Am I experiencing something that's endemic to my business, or is it something that's happening within the entire category? And you need to know that. So you want to be looking at any research you can get into your industry or category that's available publicly. But then I really think qualitative research, discussions with customers in whatever way you want to do that, whether there's individual discussions, focus groups, online community groups, and we do all of the above at the Brand Federation. But hearing a customer and hearing the deeper texture of their conversation about how they're feeling at this recession, that's something you can really do best with qual, and then surveying the customer so that you get a broader and more projectable response is a good thing to do as well. Just remember, when you're doing your surveying, we're all a little surveyed to death right now. It's becoming a problem for those of us who do market research. So find a way to make that survey feel more personal, more individual, and don't say we're doing a survey to help us, the company. really position it as a survey to help you, the customer. We're trying to find out how you're feeling at times of stress and how to serve you as well as possible. You'll get more response that way and more candor that way. And always in both, whether qual or quant, always be willing to ask the question, what are we not doing as well for you as we should be doing right now? You want to know where you have weaknesses that can be addressed, because more often than not, you have some, we all do, and they're easy to address if you know them, but they're really hard to address if you don't know anything about them.
Yeah. So if we think about kind of the biggest things that are happening during a period of recession that affect our businesses, right? One is changing sentiment, could be consumer sentiment, could be customer sentiment in the B2B context. And the other is changing needs, right? So changing sentiment and changing needs. What's the best way to use research to assess those things? Qualitative research is great.
Right.
Because it lets you get underneath the surface of some of those things. If it's about sentiment and feelings, there's nothing better than qualitative research or one-on-one conversations with your customers to understand what's really underneath those things. The other thing you can do is you probably have an ongoing brand tracker. If you don't, you should, by the way. And you should get in touch with whoever helps you field that brand tracker, whatever partner you have, to start saying, what questions can I add to the tracker that relate specifically to changing needs or changing sentiment driven by the recession? So you can look at the mechanisms you've already got in place to measure the health of your brand and adjust those mechanisms to learn the specific things you need to learn.
Yeah, that's right. And one thing related to that, we talked about those direct discussions. It always helps to have that discussion from the highest level person available in your organization. Now, that's not easy if you're a big consumer marketer. If you're running P&G, you're not going to be able to call everyone who buys Tide detergent. But in many cases, you still can reach out to those who influence your business. For example, if you're a CMO at P&G, you can reach out to Kroger and to Publix and to others who are vital to your business. We have a client who owns a wide variety of restaurants, chain restaurants. And you might say, well, how can they reach out to every individual consumer who's buying food at their restaurants? They may not have to, but the CEO can certainly reach out to their franchise owners who are also insecure at these times.
Yeah.
So don't forget those other customers that are in between you and the customer. The retailers sell your products and services, the franchisors who might be running your operations at an intermediate level, they also need to be heard from at these times.
Yeah, Salesforce too.
Yeah,
I mean, go with your sales force on calls and talk to customers. It can be helpful. So let's see, another question. How should marketers talk to senior leaders about marketing in a recession? Preserving budgets, cutting their favorite golf sponsorship, getting closer to customers, and converting skeptics who hold the purse strings. What's the best way to talk to those people?
Yeah. What do you think?
You got to take it back to the things that those people care about. This is true of probably any conversation you're going to have with anybody. When you talk to your spouse about something that's bothering him or her, you need to first say, okay, how can I put myself in their shoes? When you put yourself in the shoes of the senior leadership of your company, they're worried about the short-term performance of the company, right?
Right.
So I'm going to go back to that thing I talked about earlier, which is you got to put out the fire. What they're looking for from you is, how am I going to use the discipline of marketing to address the threat of this recession to our business?
Yeah.
So I would say, don't wait for them to ask the question. Go to them first with a plan that says, here are the principles that we're following. Steal the 5 and add your own, or pick whichever ones that make most sense to your business. But here are the principles that we're following, and here are the things we're going to do. And the reason I say that is because we've all lived through this, where if you wait for the CFO to decide how to cut your budget's toast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He or she is going to chop that. And you need to get in front of that. So you need to talk to them in a way that makes it clear to them that you get that there's a fire to put out here. But there's also strategic thinking going into how you want to help that happen, how you want to cut your costs in a smart way, and how you want to maintain that investment mindset, maintain the proximity to your customers, all the things we've talked about.
I love that. And I think when you're thinking about cutting things that can be cut quickly, again, that are those possibly wasteful parts of your marketing plan, if you go proactively to leadership and say that we're looking at scaling back some of the things we're not really sure have been working for us, it's an important thing, which goes to another question we got from one of our viewers. How do you measure which parts of that marketing spend are performing and which parts aren't performing?
Mm-hmm.
And part of my answer is you should always be measuring those.
That was my first one, was hopefully you already are.
Yeah, hopefully you are. And if not, you've got some work to do to make sure that you can set up systems that are measuring the impact of marketing spend on transactions and conversions. But those things that you can't measure, that you're just doing because they kind of feel good to do, but aren't measurable or haven't demonstrated contribution, are the things that you might want to consider pulling back. Maybe you've been going to a trade conference for years, but you really haven't gotten a lot of leads for it. You want to do it because it's the right thing to do for the association that you belong to. Kill it.
Yeah.
Sorry, association that you belong to, but kill it, because you do want to be pragmatic about this. You have to consider that things could go on longer than you think and deeper than you think. And those parts of your marketing spend that you can't prove have value probably need to be set aside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or at least questioned in a
Yes.
deeper way than you have in the past. And this is a moment where you might be able to go back and finally kill that thing that you never really liked to begin with.
That's right.
You can look at that.
And we talk about killing, but you can also cut back on things without killing. So go with the smaller trade show booth this time. Cut back on your sponsorship, but keep your sponsorship. Do the golf tournament, but don't be the title sponsor of the golf tournament. There are a lot of ways that you can still stay in some of those games, waiting for good times, but cut back on them. And here's one thing that we've noticed. A lot of times when a company cuts back on what is arguably a wasteful spend during a recession, they never go back to it when times get better. That means that they should have done it anyway. And we all have things like that.
Here's a question from Marcos. This recession is intertwined with historically unprecedented inflation. When do pricing adjustments for products or services become an important factor when making strategic decisions about securing additional market share or even keeping existing customers or share? So pricing and product adjustments.
Yeah, that is an outstanding question and a complex one to answer.
Yeah, I think they're always on the table. It does play, Marcos, into part of the conversation we had earlier, which is staying closer to your customers and finding out how their needs are changing and not cutting back on product development budgets, right? So if the needs are changing in a way that feeds into an innovation opportunity, you have to have the horsepower to deliver on that innovation opportunity. If you've cut your innovation or R&D efforts, you're not going to be able to do that. So that's a cautionary tale there. The other cautionary side, in my mind, lies in pricing, which is there may be a need or I should say a temptation to cut prices to gain share. The problem with cutting prices is it's damn hard to raise them again.
Yeah, that's right. And you may be solving a problem that you don't have. For example, we talked about lengthening sales cycle times, and the knee-jerk reaction says, well, I must be pricing too high because I'm not closing the deals as quickly as I thought I was. In many cases, you can reduce your cost in that scenario and find you're still not closing the deals any faster. The reason those deals are being closed slowly is because people are anxious and they're taking more time to consider, but that may not be a factor of price. So be careful. The other thing about cutting price too quickly is these recessions are short, and price is a part of what communicates brand. Being the lowest price in a category can often undermine the perceived value of your brand, because you go from being perceived as a premium to being perceived as a discount. And boy, if you torpedo the value of your brand and the perception around your brand just because you've got an 8-month blip, that's a mistake I would not make.
Yeah, I think price cuts are sort of the last refuge of a marketing scoundrel.
They
have
are.
nothing left. So
what you can do is add value. Add value, as we talked about with those surprises. keep the price, but give them a little more. That's a common tool in recession. It avoids having to reduce price. And we see this even in categories you wouldn't expect it, like luxury automotive. At a time when sales are slow, they don't want to reduce the cost because Mercedes doesn't want to be perceived as a discounted product line, but they might throw in the leather seats as part of a deal maker. They're not shifting the price, but they're adding value in some other way.
Yeah. Here's another question. We're investing more dollars in marketing in 2023. Good, Rich, good.
Yeah.
What tools are you using to specifically track the effectiveness of specific marketing strategies? I find it difficult to measure the success of certain strategies.
Well, we all find it difficult to measure the success of certain strategies, but there are a lot of strategies you can measure the success of it. I do think a really good tool like HubSpot or whatever CRM you're using, linked to your social media, linked to your advertising spend, linked to stages in your marketing funnel is a really good start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's as we all know, it's kind of it's the holy grail of marketing, to be able to draw a one-to-one comparison between every tactic and your revenue growth. And it's hard, if not impossible, to do. But what we can do over time is understand the relationship between top line growth and the marketing initiatives that we're creating. And if you understand that over time, you can understand where the sensitivities are, because they're going to lie in different marketing tactics in that mix that you're using, right? So, wow, if I cut my TV, my top line really comes down. But if I cut this promotional budget, maybe it doesn't come down quite as much, because I'm understanding that relationship over time. I'm getting that.
Mhm.
But you're right, Kelly, the tools like HubSpot and things like that are really great ways to get very quick real-time responses to efforts that you're doing. They're not going to be able to tie social media likes or engagement numbers to revenue growth. But as you track those social media engagements and you see what works, for instance, I'm just using that as an example, and you see what works and you see how engagement rises, and you see it, coming to life in the growth of your top line over time, or your sales force starts to say, hey, I'm hearing more about this from prospects, keep doing more of that. I start to get a sense of what the relationship of each of those tactics in my marketing mix is, and how sensitive my top line is to each one.
Yeah, it takes time and it takes some sophistication. Matt, for years you worked on the Geico account, and I know they were really rigid about measuring impact of all of their marketing spend. Are there any lessons there that could translate? It seems to me they looked at their work, even if it was general advertising, as direct response oriented, and they tried to create response from absolutely everything they did.
Yeah, they did, and they were constantly optimizing that mix. So it was the thing that I was talking about on a macro level, because Geico spends crazy amounts of money, and they spend it because it works, right? But what they're doing is adjusting the mix that they've got based on the flow of inquiries into their website, right? It's a pretty simple formula. It's really complicated to manage, but it's a very simple kind of equation. What they're seeing is, hey, when I adjust the creative in this way, the flow increases. When I adjust my media presence in this way, the flow increases. When I build up in this geography, I can see the flow increase. So they're constantly optimizing for those things. It's hard to do a one-to-one, even on a Geico level, a one correlation that says, well, when I run this TV spot, I got this many inquiries, because there's an interaction effect with them doing so many things at the same time. It's damn near impossible to pull it apart.
Right.
But they can get a sense for how the mix impacts the flow of inquiries.
So those are some ways you can do it. And I just have to say, because we are broadcasting to you today from Brand Federation World Headquarters in Richmond, Virginia. And we just talked about Geico, that I don't want to let this moment pass to acknowledge a very dear friend to all of us, Matt Maddox, who passed this week, because he has been one of the greatest champions on the Geico account for the Martin Agency that there ever has been, honestly. But he's much more than that. He's like a super great human being. And man, I think you hired him at the Martin Agency.
Yeah, I did. I knew Matt for over a decade and worked with him for over a decade, and was friends with Matt, and he was a wonderful human being. It's a loss for everybody in the marketing community. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that. The good guys in this industry, it used to be that we thought the good guys never win. Matt was a great guy and he won.
Yep.
And we're thinking about you.
Okay, we've got another question. In new products, how do you look at pricing versus established products?
Yeah, in new when you're introducing a new product, you do have an opportunity to price it any way you want. And so you can price it toward a recession or oriented market, but then again, you have the problem that Matt said. That's darn hard to raise it. And so if you're really anchoring it low, 8 months from now, you might be out of the recession, you might be really regretting it and not be able to get it back high enough, fast enough. I really think the advice we provided earlier, which is to whatever extent possible, try and hold the line on pricing. Pricing is a signal of perceived value, is a good one. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't introduce products that are more affordable because they're going to a different category. For example, most consumer product manufacturers have tiers of product. If you're P&G, you've got Tide, it's more expensive than Gain. You're targeting different things and different products to different categories. You can't do that in every category, but you can do that in most. But be careful. If all of a sudden Apple significantly drops their price of the iPhones we've all been buying like candy, now they're going to be stuck with that price.
Some of us.
Yeah,
some of us.
Some of us, yes.
Okay,
Me.
Mr. Black Turtleneck. So, one other thought back to that point is, even outside the context of a recession, I would want to ask, what role do you think this product plays in your overall portfolio? Some products are meant to replace products that are currently in the portfolio. Some products are meant to complement those products, and pricing can be a way to ensure that that happens, right? So I can price this new product in a way that completely removes from consideration the old product it's meant to replace.
Yeah.
I can also price it relative to the existing product in a way that communicates its value against that product so that they both can occupy an enduring place in the portfolio, right? So it's a thought about portfolio management and how pricing relates to that too. So I'd ask you that. That's one of the first questions I would ask if you were coming to me asking about a new product.
Makes a lot of sense.
Cody has a question. Hey, Cody. How effective can an increased focus on earned/organic media be for brands during recessions? Also, content and thought leadership.
Yeah, well, content and thought leadership should be part of everyone's strategy, recession or not. In my opinion, it's one of the more affordable ways to build your brand and build your voice in the marketplace. And the shift that I would be making in recessionary times is to make sure that content is extremely aligned with the way that people are feeling in a recession, which you will already know because I told you to go off and do consumer research and find out how your consumers are feeling. But use that knowledge to fine-tune the voice of your company so that you're offering help. Actually, we're doing that right now, right? We know that a lot of our clients are anxious about the recession, and we know that some of our competitors, some of whom are here today, are anxious about the recession. We're all in this together, and we want to be aware of that anxiety and try and respond in ways that are helpful. That's exactly what you want to do with your thought leadership. Be aware of people's anxiety, respond in ways that are as helpful as possible to that anxiety. You do not want to be caught being tone deaf to people's anxieties, their fears, their concerns for their job. If anything, almost exaggerate their concerns and fears in the way that you address them with your social media, your earned media, your thought leadership, and other elements.
So yes, and so make your earned media, social media as useful as it can be in the context that we've got right now. The other thing that's great about that, if you think about that McGraw-Hill study that I cited, a lot of it's about advertising investment. And when that study was run, the advertising options that you had were pretty narrow. They were just, big paid media. Right?
Yeah.
That's what you had with the usual 8 media mix that we always played with back in the 80s. But now, brands that don't have a ton of money, whose presence in the marketplace would be dramatically cut, if not completely eliminated in a recession because they're cutting their budgets,
right,
can keep their presence in the marketplace through thought leadership, earned media, social media. And it becomes a massive advantage for lower spending brands because you don't have to disappear in a recession. You can take the efficiency and it's almost cheap or it's almost free, right?
Yeah.
The cheapness, almost freeness of social media and earned media to maintain your presence in the market at a time when traditional media might not be affordable.
Mhm.
Super important.
It's
We're
great.
big proponents of it. So let's see. I'm looking at questions there. Yeah, let's do one more. Any examples of recession-born innovation that accelerated a company through a downturn?
Wow, that's interesting. I really have to rewind and remember which innovations came out during recessions, which would be easier to do, but they only last 8 months. Did I mention that before? That's interesting.
I'll give you one. So, and this goes way back to the late 80s. And
Okay.
it was an example of a lease program that a luxury car did. And they had never done it before. It was Mercedes-Benz. And they had always thought that leasing would cheapen their brand, right? We're Mercedes-Benz, we don't lease cars. We only sell to people who can afford to buy our wonderful automobiles. What they did coming out of the recession was realize that there's a whole segment of people. It was about the same time they came out with the baby Benz, the C-Class, right? There's a whole segment of people that they need to get if they want to cultivate the next generation of Mercedes-Benz owners. And they created a lease program that was structured in a way to allow those people to buy their car, but never cheapened the brand. And it made the brand feel like it was in tune with the needs of its customers, but it always went to market in a way that always burnished the star. It never tarnished the star to do it that way.
I think I can go you one better.
That way.
I think I can go you even one better.
Good. You're going to stay with cars, aren't you?
I'm going to stay with cars. The Hyundai Assurance Program was a program that started after the collapse in 2008.
Yeah.
The hardest hit sector in the collapse of 2008 was not housing, it was automotive. People stopped buying automobiles. It was dead in the water. Of course, because if you don't know what the future holds, why are you going to go out and buy a big new car? So that anxiety about what is happening in the future and whether I'm going to keep my job or not caused people to stop buying. And Hyundai, I believe with their partner Wyden and Kennedy, created—
I think it was Goodby.
Goodby, got it. Goodby, good, smart marketers helping their clients through a difficult time, came up with a program that said, if you buy a Hyundai and you lose your job, just bring your car back and you won't have to make any more payments. This way, they eliminated the downside of buying a car now. And the impact of it was so significant that Hyundai won Marketer of the Year that year. And they also won a disproportionate lift in market share versus their competitors. That's maybe the biggest overall story about marketing in a recession is at a time when your competitors are weak, you can make huge gains.
That's a good example too, because they didn't have to cut their price.
That's right.
Right.
They didn't cut their price. They created a program that said, we'll take the car back if you lose your job. And in the entire length of that program, by the way, less than 100 vehicles were returned to Hyundai. It cost them almost nothing.
It was more, that's amazing.
Yeah. It was more about perception than about reality. And they understood that it was more about perception than reality. So they went after the perceptions, they went after the fears. You can only do that if you're in tune with what the customer's anxieties are. You're thoughtful about innovating, as Matt pointed out earlier. Don't drop R&D. In fact, lean into R&D so that you can innovate new program that responds to that anxiety. And you're quick on the draw to market and promote those new advantages that you've created during a downturn.
Awesome. Our time is up. It's flowing, hasn't it?
It has. You know what? This is the longest we've gone without mentioning Elon Musk.
You were going to do that.
Now I've mentioned it.
You did it.
I blew it right there.
You buy me a beer now.
All right.
Anyway, thank you all for joining us. We're really happy that you were able to do this. We're going to do more of these. They're a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Fun for us. I hope they're not.
We hope you got something useful out of this. It's been a really fun conversation. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for joining us for the Brands in Recession webinar from Brand Federation. Come to brandfederation.com. We're going to have a white paper up tomorrow with those 5 points and some copy explaining them. So come on in, download that white paper, and we'll see you either on the next webinar, maybe on the next Beer and Brands, or in webland at brandfederation.com.
And if you have other questions that we didn't get to, feel free to email Matt or I. I'm going public with our email addresses right now.
There they are.
Oh, there they are. God, look at that.
Amazing.
The technology, it really works. thank you all for being here with us.
Thanks, everybody.